Hello friends! Hey, I wanted to show you how to do one of my favorite techniques. Lots of different videos using this multi-stamping technique to get these gorgeous Christmas cards. So I'm going to use this stamp by Penny Black, and it's called Streaming is the name of it. And there it is. All right, so let's get started. So I've got tons of color combinations to show you, and I'm going to show you how I get this beautiful looking simple Christmas card. So I start by using my Stamp Perfect stamping positioning tool, and I've already got my stamp positioned in here in the corner. Now here's a little tip of something I did, because I want to be able to put my cardstock directly into the corner. I find with this technique, if I have it out, it's okay, it works, but I have to keep realigning the line, realigning it to make sure that it's exactly in the right position. Otherwise, things can shift. My stamp can shift on, the paper shifts, not the stamp. The paper shifts, and then I don't get a really clear, crisp stamped image. And so I really like having the paper in the corner as much as possible. Now, because this stamp has like this little bit of a buffer, a little edge, just the way they make it, what I did is I just took my scissors and I cut it off. And at first I kind of thought, no, I can't do that. And then I thought, why not? I'm going to make it so much easier to be able to use this stamp and to be able to use it over and over. And I'm going to love it. I'm not going to have to fight with this. And so I cut just the edge off right here. You can kind of see it. And right here, I cut so that it fits right up against this edge. Okay. So there you go. First little tip. Okay. So I've got my cardstock in the corner, and so I've cut it a little bigger than what I need for my card front. So I've cut it 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'll trim it down so that it fits onto a card that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I'm going to use my favorite double-ended watercolor brushes by Staedtler. Okay, so I'll set that aside. So I'm going to use a bunch of these blue colors first to get the water on my stamp. Okay, so I'm going to use the brush end of the marker, and just on an angle, I just take that marker and just color where it is that the water is. Now, it took me a few seconds just looking at it at first to try and figure out where the water was, just with this beautiful stamp. But if you're having a hard time kind of figuring out the image, stamp it off in a different color. Stamp it in gray or something, and see exactly what the image looks like, and then give it a clean, and then go back and use your markers. And then this way you kind of get a good context of where the stamp is. So this is why we love using the stamp tool, because the stamp was sticky because I had used Versamark on it and then cleaned it. And so as soon as you go to stamp it again, the first couple times are probably going to be sticky. So I position my paper back into that corner, and now I've used my first kind of turquoisey color, and I'm going to use the brush end again for all of these. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of this kind of next step of the blue, kind of a bit darker blue, and see how I'm just kind of brushing it around, and I'm just using the edge, and I'm not completely covering the whole water area because I've already done it in this beautiful turquoise color. So now I'm going to stamp it with that second one, and so I've added it. I'm kind of highlighting. So those two colors are quite similar, which is really nice because it actually gives lots of tone. So if I want to, I can add a little bit more. If I'm just like, I can't quite see enough of it, I just want to go a little darker, now's the time to go a little darker. And I especially like going a little darker right here in this area, because in the stamp, you can see it's kind of shadowy in here, which means that the artist intended for that to be a bit darker. Okay, I like that. Okay, now I'm going to the next color, blue. And so this one is quite a jump in the color. And so you're gonna really see this one showing up on the stamped image. So I wanna add less and less now of these markers, okay? As I get darker, I'm adding less and less of the marker color on there so that I don't overpower my original colors. So see how it's just adding some shading. All right. And so I'm going to go on to my next one. Okay, so you can see the boldness there. This one's really going to show up. So I'm adding less and less of my marker. Okay, and I don't want it to be too streaky looking, right? I want it to look like natural water, but this water is flowing in such a direction. It makes it easy just to keep my brush tip moving horizontally back and forth. So see how pretty that is? It's just adding some shadowing, some depth. And so I'm gonna look at my stamp and I'm gonna think, okay, right in here, which is here, I want to add a little bit more of that same color just to kind of darken it in that area and kind of highlight what's going on there. Okay, so I'm just adding a little bit. I don't want to overpower with too much color because then I lose my first two colors. Okay, but I love that. That looks so good. Okay, and my last color of blue, and I'm just using the ones in the Staedtler pack. I'm not going to use a ton of it again, right? I'm just going to keep it sparse because I don't want it to overpower. Kind of moving it around in different areas. All right, that looks fantastic. Give it a really good push. And let's see how that looks. Ooh, fantastic. Love it, love it. All right, so I think up here in this area, so that's right in here, I want to go a little darker because like I was saying, I think the artist was intending for there to be a bit of some shadowing up in there. So I'm going to add a little. And you can always take your finger and dab off a little bit if you find it's too streaky. Just use your finger before you stamp it and stamp some of that off so it's not too streaky. Okay, I really love it. That looks fantastic. Okay, making sure my paper is back into the corner. It's positioned well. My magnets are on there. Okay, I'm gonna set those aside. Now, the original card that I showed you, I have a whole bunch that I've done different color combinations. My trees I did in black and gray. This time, just because I want to show some variance, I'm going to do my trees in these two browns. So again, I'm keeping my brush marker on an angle and I'm just coloring the whole tree. So now I got to be careful coming over here to where the water is because obviously I don't want to get brown on the water. But what I do love as well about these markers is that they are not fast drying. So for a technique like this, I can do all the trees and then stamp it. So my paper's in the corner, it's positioned well. Move my magnet, stamp. Okay, oh, I like it in the brown. That looks really wonderful. I love it. Okay, so I did this kind of reddish one first. So I'm gonna take the darker one and I'm gonna just add some here. I'm gonna kind of focus on that trunk, try and keep my brush not like in a perfect line, not like horizontally moving up perfectly, but kind of adding some depth in there, a little darker in the center. Just a little wispy on the edges there. Yeah, make sure I get that line, and then the same thing over here. Just a little bit of depth in there. Let's see how that turns out. Good stamp. Oh yeah, that looks wonderful. Yeah, that's very pretty. see it nice and close. That looks so good. Okay, so that's as far as I'm gonna go with the stamping. Okay, so now what I do is I put my paper back into that corner, back into my spot, and I use a piece of paper towel or a baby wipe and just a little bit of water. I got a whole lot on there, and I'm gonna just give it a dab onto the stamp and remove a bit of the marker ink color. And one thing I love about these Staedtler markers is that they don't dye the stamp extremely well, you know. I don't know what the word is, but they actually come off really well. And I have like used lots of other markers where they don't come off really well and it stains the rubber, which is fine. I mean, I buy stuff to use it, so I don't care if it gets a little bit marked up. So I'm gonna just use another piece of paper towel and dry that off. So now you've noticed that I have not moved that stamp. It's in the exact same spot and my paper is over there in the corner. Now I'm gonna take some Versamark watermark ink and I'm loading up and stamping that image. Okay, gonna take and stamp that up, getting a good crisp image. All right, so now I can take my paper out of my stamping tool and set my stamping tool aside. Okay, so now I'm gonna use clear embossing powder and heat set it. So let's just put some on there. Okay, let's heat set that. All right, so I'm not gonna finish that because I actually have one that's already done. Now I did this one in black, so it's a little bit different color tones than the other one. But let me show you how I add a background to get all of these beautiful colors like that on this beautiful card, okay? So I take my card and I like putting it on a piece of paper towel just so that I save my mat. And then what I did is I took and I stamped this, and actually my very first one that I did, I hadn't cut the edge of that rubber stamp. And so when I was realigning this a few times, the paper shifted. I didn't have it perfectly lined up, and so it offset and it got blurry, okay? So then I was like, okay, I gotta figure this out, and that's where then I decided to cut my rubber stamp so that I would have a perfect image every single time. But the great part about that is that I had this one that had been stamped off already. So I took and cut it right here at the horizon, at the landscape spot, okay? And so I've added just a little bit of painter's tape to the back, and I'm gonna line it up right on that exact same line and just hold that down. Now on my samples, I did a few. I think actually I only ended up doing one that has no moon on it, and then the rest of them I added a moon. And it's a really easy little trick. And so take a piece of cardstock and punch it out, and I used a 1-inch punch. Add a little bit of painter's tape to the back, kind of put your finger on it so that it kind of gets rid of some of the stickiness. And then you can decide where you want to place your moon. So on this card, I placed it here on the right. On this card, I placed it on the left. So, I mean, both look fantastic. You can decide where you want your moon to go. I'm going to put the moon on the left side this time. So I'm going to put it right here and stick it down. Now, I've got my masked stamped piece on top there, right? So I'm going to be able to keep the ink away from the bottom area and keep the snow looking white. And now I'm going to ink the top. And so I'm going to use oxides. And so I've got seedless preserves and wilted violet, uncharted mariner, and chipped sapphire. Okay, so I've got a paddle and a foam on each one. All right, there they are. So I'm going to hold this in place, and I'm going to start on the moon area. So I'm going to go very, very softly. And so what I like to do is start up here on the top and just start to very softly dab that ink on there. Okay, so now I want this to look like the light is kind of picking up against the moon and coming across this way. So I'm starting on the top left, and then I'm coming across down on the right, making it look like, you know, the light is picking up on it. The light is hitting it. Some of them I did with a whole bunch of yellow, right? And so it really looks like the sun is picked up, or sorry, it's the moon. The light has picked up and is reflecting off of the moon and just glowing down onto the snowy landscape, which is beautiful. And I do love that look, but I also really love the purple and the blue tones as well. So now I'm just tapping as well, just adding a little bit of ink as I go along the bottom and a little bit along the top. So now from the bottom, I'm going to start to swirl the paddle, and from the top, I'm going to start to swirl the paddle. So I have this rule about, it's an eye grabber, is when color is in threes. And so I'm going to add just a little bit of that purpley color over here. And so there's 1, there's 2, and there's 3. Now I'm going to take and start to fill in a little bit with the uncharted mariner. Again, I'm just tapping to start with, just to start adding that ink in there. Okay. And then I'm going to start on an edge and start to swirl and start to blend those colors together. Again, here, starting on that edge and starting to swirl and blend together. All right, that was Uncharted Mariner. Last one I'm going to use is Chipped Sapphire. So I'm going to come in here. I especially want the top corner to have a dark kind of an edge to it, right? Like as the landscape kind of comes out, it gets darker, but where the light is hitting the moon, there's like this bit of a punch of color. So now I'm going to come back with some of my other colors, my wilted violet and my seedless preserves, and swirl, 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 and just really blend those colors together. Add a little bit of seedless preserves over here, so it looks like that light is just touching it and picking up over here. So isn't that gorgeous? Just like that. So now I'm going to take my moon and just gently lift that off. There it is. And the same with my masking piece for the bottom. There you go. Isn't that gorgeous already? Now I take a scrap piece of paper and I just basically rip it on a bit of a jagged edge. And then now I'm going to use it as a mask to add a bit of color to the bottom. So see how I've just got some highlights, some hints of color to make it look like those hills have been kissed by the light of the sky. Okay, so I'm going to start at the top, and this is where my pink kind of seedless preserves color is. So I'm barely adding ink, and I'm going to just use the edge of it, and I'm going to just tap along and add a little bit of pink there and a little bit of wilted violet in there as well. Very, very, very little. Okay. Then I'm going to just basically what I did is I followed the little trees and just kind of went, okay, well, there's a little tree. Oops, oops, oh, don't do that. And so I found a tree little area, and then I just added a little bit of color. So I tried to keep like the purpley pink in the center areas, and then as I came out away from this focal light, so I'm going to add just a little bit of purple there, then I started to add some of the Uncharted Mariner, and as I got away from the light source, then I added a bit more of the darker of the blues kind of down in here. So we're going to just have this, tilt this a little bit, and we're going to dance along here a little bit. And we're going to add some of that pink being I dropped my paddle, and so that'll help cover it up and blend it anyways, okay? Just a little smidget of it. So you can see how I'm barely touching the cardstock with that paddle, and just the tiniest little hint of color, hint of color, just really pops it and gives the landscape a real variance to it. It just kind of comes alive, doesn't it? So let's use a little bit of this Uncharted Mariner in here. And I think we just need a little bit of a hill right here with Uncharted Mariner. Okay, wow, that looks so good, doesn't it? All right, so now I would just set those inks aside, and then really the rest of the card is so easy. I'm going to cut it to size, okay? Then I'm going to mount it to my cardstock, and I used different cardstock bases depending on the ink colors I had used. And then I adhered a Merry Christmas. And lastly, I splattered it with just some white acrylic paint. So let me show you my different color combinations that I've done. So beauty, hey, just look at that with the softer pinks in there and a darker, richer fuchsia in there. This one, definitely more the purples, loving that. Softer, kind of mauve purple. This one with a bunch of yellow in there. Just love the way the light is kind of dancing. And then lastly, this one as well, softer with some yellows. So simple, easy cards to make with this beautiful stamp set from Penny Black called Streaming. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and please subscribe and like my channel and watch for new videos to come out. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye.